Uh, he is well equipped. He's going to talk about the resources, of course, that he has available for you from creation.com. He's a speaker, of course, a scientist, a writer with Creation Ministries International. And it's creation.com if you ever want to look at their website. But let's just go ahead and get started. Again, I'll introduce him better in the 11 o'clock service. But let's just, first of all, welcome Dr. Robert Carter.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rob. Now that you know that, I'm going to spend more time talking about myself and the ministry I work for in the next service. But for now, we have about an hour to give a 3-hour talk on dinosaurs. I'm not going to talk really fast. What I'm going to do is try to hit the highlights and the big questions we have, the big pictures of these very enigmatic animals. And basically, I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions and see how well we answer the questions. Now, my goal is to tire out the sign language interpreter with a lot of big words. But we'll see. I'll try to be as merciful as possible. This question of dinosaurs, when I was young, really bugged me. Because everything that I learned, all schooling, all the TV, it was always millions of years and dinosaurs, as those things were combined. And it took me a very long time to tease these things apart. So I understand the struggle. When we're done, you're going to see that a lot of what that I'm presenting to you, I learned myself from CMI's resources, either our magazine, Creation Magazine, our website, creation.com. I have several books on dinosaurs out here also. So I'm not going to leave you hanging with no more answers. I'm going to run through a couple quick things and then point you to where there's more answers. And Creation Magazine is a great spot for that. All right, you ready for the first question? What is a dinosaur? What makes a dinosaur different than an alligator? Well, the answer is dinosaurs stood up. Whether 2 legs or 4 legs, they bore their weight on their legs. All the other reptiles alive today, their legs stick out to the side. So if you go down to South Georgia and you spook an alligator in the Okefenokee Swamp, they do a push-up, they run, and if they're tired, they rest on their belly again. But dinosaurs, they stood up. They also had a hole through their skull. So their shape is different than all the other reptiles. They are a unique group of reptiles. Did you just learn something? When I was younger, I remember reading in the Bible about people living for hundreds of years. I said, oh, well, maybe if an iguana lived for hundreds of years, it would morph into something like a T-Rex. What's your answer? No, because iguanas and tyrannosaurs are different. And in fact, we have lots of baby dinosaur fossils. We know that baby T-Rexes look like big T-Rexes. So there must be another way to explain dinosaurs. But then we have a problem. We don't have a time machine. We can't go back and see what happened to them. What's the big story here? What killed off the dinosaurs? Why are they not here today? Okay, flood. Good. When you turn on your television, not Sunday school, what do you hear? The big meteor. Does anyone know how long ago that was in the evolutionary model? Oh, interesting. No one's shouting out the number. Ah, there we go. 65 million years in the evolutionary number. I don't believe the Earth is that old, but I need to know the evolutionary number so I can understand what they're talking about. So in this talk, I'm going to throw out millions of years several times, and then we're going to put it all in context. But supposedly, 65 million years or so ago, a big meteor hit the Yucatan Peninsula, and it caused so much ash to go up into the atmosphere, it cooled off the Earth and killed off the dinosaurs. Okay, but the crocodiles survived, the turtles survived, the birds and the mammals survived, the butterflies survived. What? Hold it. This is strange. Now, from my perspective, I have a hard time explaining how this incredibly diverse group of animals all died. The big ones, the little ones, the herbivores, the carnivores, the ones that lived in the tropics, the ones that lived in the north, they're all gone. And yet at the same time, buried with dinosaurs are all sorts of sensitive animals that should not have survived a big climate catastrophe. So nobody knows what happened to them, and the evolutionary story is not bulletproof. There's some big questions that get raised when you talk about a big meteor. And by the way, not all scientists believe a meteor hit the earth and cooled off the earth and killed off the dinosaurs. Some evolutionary biologists or evolutionists who believe the earth is billions of years old, they think the dinosaurs dying out beforehand. Some of them say the dinosaurs survived after the fact. There's a lot of contention in science, and we got to be careful, because when we're presented with science, it's distilled down to talking points. And the talking points are not what are happening in the halls of science where people are arguing. We're given a very consistent story, and it's powerful because they're not giving you all the things they actually don't know. You okay with that? Okay. Another question. How many species of dinosaurs were there? Who can name a species of dinosaur? T-Rex, Velociraptor, Stegosaurus. No one said Pachyrhinosaurus. Styracosaurus. Now, if you said, if you named one of the pterosaurs, one of the flying dinosaurs, actually they're not dinosaurs. The pteranodons, the pterosaurs, they had a different bone structure. They don't have the legs of a dinosaur. If you said mosasaur or plesiosaur, one of the giant aquatic reptiles, they're not dinosaurs either. There's actually multiple groups of reptiles that are extinct, not just the dinosaurs. And we tend to lump them together and call them dinosaurs, but they're not really. But looking at this picture, there are 11 different ceratopsid dinosaurs. How many species are there? Well, this is a problem. See, I'm a biologist. Do you know how I define what a species is? If two things can interbreed, they're the same species. If they can't, they're different species. Do you know how a geologist defines species? If two things look different, they're different species. That's the world's largest dog standing next to the world's smallest dog. I'm confident that if geologists didn't know what dogs were and they found bones of these animals in the fossil record, they would call them different species. Because Charles Darwin taught us that species change slowly over millions of years, therefore it would have taken millions of years to produce those differences. Only that's not true. These breeds didn't even exist 100 years ago. I saw a documentary on Charles Darwin, some famous actors in it, and saw Darwin and his life and his family, and they had a golden retriever. Goldies did not exist in the 1850s. Oh, species can change, right? And they can change quickly, right? How many species are there? Don't know. I don't have them in a zoo. I can't breed them. I can't do cross-fertilization experiments. But looking at this, I see a group of animals that are similar. All the ceratopsids have some sort of a frill, some horns, and a beak. In fact, if you found a toe bone of a dinosaur in a fossil record, you could say, oh, it's a ceratopsid toe bone. They're different than the other types of dinosaurs. And yet, looking at their diversity and considering diversity of known species, I suspect that there's something different going on here. In fact, we have to use a different word. The word is the created kind. God didn't create species. In Genesis, it says he creates different kinds of animals designed to reproduce within themselves and not to reproduce with other kinds of animals. But he didn't tell us where the divisions were between the kinds. But looking at the fossil record, there's only 50 basic types or kinds of dinosaurs. You got the ceratopsids, and then the duck-billed hadrosaurs. You have the ankylosaurs that are built like little tanks. They're very heavy on top and they have a club on the back tail or spikes. We have the stegosaurs with the spikes on their back. The sauropods, like the long ones, and then the challenge, the theropods. What's a theropod? This is a theropod. the meat-eating, two-legged dinosaurs with very often small front legs. And honestly, those small front legs are a mystery, and no one can explain why they're there. They just are. But looking at the theropods, the meat eaters, how would you have originally described them? I mean, look at Tyrannosaurus rex. He's got 6-inch long teeth. Is he an herbivore, a carnivore, just a scavenger who eats dead things, or an omnivore that eats everything? Who says carnivore? The fierce predator stalking the Mesozoic plains. Who says herbivore? Oh. Now, when I asked you the question, is he carnivore, where did you get your information from? From Scripture or from the evolutionary community? Jurassic Park. By the way, almost every dinosaur in Jurassic Park is actually a Cretaceous dinosaur. Oh well. But you can't say Cretaceous Park, that just doesn't roll off the tongue. Scripture tells us something very different than secular science tells us. Look at Genesis chapter 1. This is God talking to Adam. He says, "See, I've given you every herb that yields seed which is on the face of all the earth. And every tree whose fruit yields seed to you shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I've given every green herb for food," and it was so. All right, Christian, let me ask you a question. Did God create all animals to eat plants? Yes or no? Do some animals today eat meat? Yes or no? Do we have a problem? Good. Yes, it's a problem. But it's a problem that can be solved. It's not actually a problem, but there is a discrepancy between the natural world and Scripture that we have to answer. And we answer that by starting off in Genesis chapter 3. This is after Adam ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He rebelled against God, and God curses the world. He says to Adam, "Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles this shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground," etc., etc. This is called the curse. This is where suffering and death comes into the world. This is where hunger comes into the world. If you got in a time machine and came back to this spot 150 years ago, the trees around here would look very different. The dominant tree was the chestnut. A major source of the pioneers' food in this area and Native Americans was chestnut. But they're all dead. In the early 1900s, a blight basically wiped them out. There's almost hardly any left. Scientists are trying to breed them because they figure they're resistant to blight, and they're not doing very well successfully. And this is a tricky challenge, but something changed. And there were reports of chipmunks eating roadkill. Cute little chipmunks, the pointy teeth, run out on the road. Why are they eating meat? Because they were hungry. Those teeth that God gave to those animals to eat plants are also really good at eating meat. And an animal, when it's hungry, is going to eat whatever it can find. And all I have to do is appeal to your history and what your ancestors used to eat. Gross, nasty, but when you're hungry, you can eat whatever you can. And we also have to be careful because science will rip the rug right out from underneath you when you're not paying attention. And science will change. And this is a great example of how science changed. Back in the day, when they found a dinosaur, they chisel the bones out of the rock and they bring it back to the museum. They set it up and you get to go to the museum and see all these big dinosaurs. It's amazing. But the new generation paleontologists, they're going back to the same sites. And they realize that the fossil hunters in the 1800s destroyed them. Some of the world-class bone sites were ruined because they're only looking for the big bones. They dug right through the little dinosaurs. They dug right through the mammals. And now there's piles of chips, and they're trying to reassemble these priceless fossils that were destroyed 100 years or so years ago. So now, when they find a dinosaur, and a lot of dinosaurs are intact, the whole animal's buried in the rock. They don't just chisel it out, they stop and they look at it and say, oh, and sometimes you can see a stain in the rock in the shape of the animal's body because it was buried whole. And once they realized that, they said, wait a minute, that's its heart. there's the liver. That's the stomach. And they started actually cutting out the rocks and taking and studying the stomach contents of dinosaurs. That's amazing. Because not just the bones are preserved. And when they did that with the theropods, they realized most of the theropod stomachs are packed with plants. So even though they have this pointy teeth, and even though their eyes are facing forward like a predator, even though they have the sharp claws, they were eating plants. And we know that because of what's in their bellies. But some dinosaurs have crunched up bones in their stomach. Mammals, birds, other dinosaurs. We know that they're eating meat. What happened? Well, you've heard of the word adaptation, right? I believe the coat color of a polar bear is an adaptation. Because if you're brown or black and you're on ice, the seal's going to see you coming from a mile away. You're never going to catch a seal. But if you're white, you sneak right up to that animal and you're right on top of it before it sees you. That's a great adaptation. Brown bears and black bears, have you ever seen a bear in the woods? It's a scary thing to see a bear in the woods, especially when they stop moving because they disappear. You could be watching the bear and all of a sudden, where'd it go? It's right there. You just can't see it because of the coloration. So, coat color in animals, adaptation. Have you ever tried to hang a picture on the wall? You know, get those little plastic things you have to stick in the drywall? And the first thing you have to do is you have to poke a hole in the wall before you stick the little plastic thing in and turn a little screw so you can hang your picture, right? And so what do? You go to your shop and you get that little tray of all the little pieces and you go to your bedroom. You're like, okay, I'm going to hang this thing. Oh, and you forgot your hammer. I've done that 2 or 3 times. So what do? Well, you have to poke a hole in the wall, and you use that little screw to do it. And you take your screwdriver, you turn it around, you go pop, 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 pop. Put the little plastic thing in there, screw the little screw in there, hang your picture. You ever done that? That's called exaptation. You took a tool and used it for something it wasn't originally designed for. A screwdriver is not a hammer. But in that condition, it works just fine as a hammer. Well, the sharp claws that God gave to herbivorous bears are really good at holding down seals. The sharp teeth that God gave to bears, a black bear can take a blueberry branch, put it in his mouth, and go, burp, and pull off the blueberries and leave the leaves on the stem. Those teeth are amazing. Polar bears have the same teeth. And those teeth can tear into thick flesh. So as bears are spreading out on the earth after Noah's flood, they're going to go to all different environments. And they're large, strong animals with big, sharp teeth and sharp claws. And you know what? The bears that strayed northward, away from plants, 99% of their diet is meat. And they have the same tools that black bears have. Apply that thought to dinosaurs. And we realize most dinosaurs did not eat meat. And even the ones with the sharp teeth and the pointy claws, most of those didn't eat meat either. But the few that did eat meat have the same tools as the plant eaters. And we don't need evolution of millions of years to explain where carnivory came from. We just need God creating plant eaters and then the earth to fall into a state of decay. But some were definitely eating meat. This is a duck-billed dinosaur tailbone, a hadrosaur, with a T-Rex tooth embedded in it. And the bone healed up around the tooth. So not only did this dinosaur survive a T-Rex attack, it walked around the rest of his life in a tremendous amount of pain because it had a tooth embedded in its spine. The fossil record is full of really ugly things. That's just one example of many, many possible. Okay. Skipping over some details, because I'm assuming most of you have at least a Sunday school understanding of Genesis. We have creation, we have Noah's flood coming up, we know dinosaurs lived. We have their bones. We can assemble a dinosaur skeleton the same way you find a horse dead out in the field and it's just bones. You can assemble the horse skeleton. So we know dinosaurs really lived. They really lived on the earth. But that means God would have had to create them. That means they would have had to have been on earth with man. That means they would have died in the flood. Is there any evidence that dinosaurs died in a big watery catastrophe? Really? Have you ever seen in Jurassic Park them saying, oh, this thing died in a flood? Of course not. And yet, they know good and well Most dinosaurs are buried with fish. Oh. It's the strangest thing why all these land animals obviously are buried in marine sediments. Well, it's because they were caught up in a flood from the oceans. But not only that, the original Jurassic Park movie, the opening scene tells us something. Remember the opening scene for you to see in the movie? They had this machine goes boom in the ground. And doing like an echoey thing under, and they run over to the computer screen. And computers were so fast back then, it went shoo, 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 and the picture of the velociraptor appears. And the velociraptor has his head arched back and his tail arched up. And this is a mystery. You've seen this. It's called the dead dinosaur posture. The evolutionary paleontologists call this a dead dinosaur posture because almost always when we find an intact dinosaur skeleton, it's arched like this. And that's weird because when a squirrel dies, it doesn't do that. But an animal that's drowning does. And so now the dead dinosaur posture, even according to the evolutionary community, is evidence of drowning. And almost always we find dinosaurs in that pose, except for the ankylosaurs, because they can't arch their backs. They have this big armor plating on the back. In fact, most ankylosaurs are found upside down. Why? Because if you're top heavy and you're sinking in water, you're going to flip over and settle upside down. Dinosaurs are telling us about Noah's flood. Now, is the word dinosaur in the Bible? No, because the Bible's translated to English first time in the 1300s. And at least 4 or 5 translations total before the word dinosaur was even invented. So it couldn't have been in any older translations, and modern scholars, they wouldn't want to put the word, and it shouldn't be in there. The word dinosaur is not in the Bible. But there's a word called tanin. Sometimes it's translated sea monster, sometimes jackal, which is, I don't think, a good translation at all. It's the ancient Hebrews believed in really big, scary animals, monster things. It's funny because it's almost like they believed in dragons. And if you consider the word dragon, not How to Train Your Dragon, and not even medieval depictions of dragons, but you go back in time, almost all cultures in the world believed in very large lizards. And if you look at the description of those animals, sometimes they really very well fits a dinosaur description. But the word dinosaur itself is not in Scripture. But consider this, Job chapter 40. This is God chastising Job for everything Job doesn't know. You know Job. Remember that song a couple years ago, "The heavenly storehouse is laden with snow"? Remember we all sang that in church. Remember that one? No? That's from Job. It's God appears in his, Job sues God. That's what happens. And God comes down, appears on his own defense. He says, "Oh yeah, Job?" And he asks Job all these science questions. Where does snow come from? Where's the rain come from? All these science questions. And he goes, "Behold, behemoth." And all of a sudden, we have to stop. Have you trained yourself that when you see a non-English word in your Bible that's just transliterated, do you translate it in your head? Behemoth is not English. That's Hebrew. Behemoth means beast of beasts. Behold, the beast of beasts. Oh, what's God going to say? Well, he made him as I made you, he tells Job. Wow, that's a reference to creation. And then he eats grass. Oh, he's an herbivore. He's got strength in his loins and power in the muscle of his belly, so he's a big, strong herbivore. And he hangs his tail like a cedar. I don't care what Bible translation you use. I've looked at like 20. They all have the phrase, like a cedar. Now, to an American, it doesn't mean much, because there are cedar trees around here. They grew up in old fields and old roads and things, those scrubby little things. There's no big cedar trees here. But to Job, the largest tree he could possibly have seen in his Middle Eastern life would have been the cedars of Lebanon, the massivest trees in the Middle East. If the Bible said he's got a tail like a sequoia, you know exactly what that's referring to. He's got a big old tail. God is telling Job that the beast of beasts, which is an herbivore and incredibly strong, has a really big tail. And you know what? There's no other animal living today or from the ancient record that fits that description other than sauropod dinosaurs. Now, I don't know that Job's talking about a sauropod, But the largest land animals that God created deserve the title beast of beasts. And they're herbivores and had a big tail. Just saying. But that leads to the next question. Does Noah have a problem? How are we going to get literally monstrous-sized animals onto Noah's Ark? Animals that could not fit through these doors to come up here. How do you get them onto an ark? Well, let me answer that in several ways. First, amongst all the different kinds of dinosaurs, there are some fully grown that are small. Not everything was the size of a T-Rex. In fact, there are hadrosaurs and sauropods and theropods that are small at the largest size. This is Compsognathus. He's the size of a chicken. Also, the largest land animals ever to walk the planet came from eggs that are smaller than ostrich eggs. So Noah could have taken hatchlings, babies, teenagers. He doesn't have to take great-great-granddaddy Apatosaurus who's near the end of his life. But also, consider how many animals he would have had to take. Earlier, I said there's about 50 basic kinds of dinosaurs, right? Well, you have to take 2 of each kind of animal. What's 50 times 2? Noah would have only had to take about 100 dinosaurs on board the ark. And even the largest ones, there's plenty of room. He's only got to take, depending on where you draw the line, I like to draw the line about the family level. So all the cats in the world are one kind, all the dogs in the world are one kind. He's only got to take 600 pairs of animals total. There's extra room on the ark. There's too much room, actually, for only 600 pairs. And there's plenty of room left over for all the food and all the water they need for an entire year. So even the big dinosaurs can fit, and yet I don't believe the big dinosaurs had to fit. So it's not actually a problem. There's multiple ways to answer it, but even if you had to take the big ones, okay, whatever. So a lot of people are struggling with this, but it's not even something we need to struggle with. You okay with that? All right, I'm going to shift gears again. After the flood, assuming dinosaurs are on the ark, they're going to live on the earth after the flood, but they're not here today. In fact, I wrote an article for creation.com. The boss made me change the title. I had dinosaurs are extinct, but dinosaurs are almost certainly extinct is the title. And I was analyzing reports from people from 1960s and 70s and earlier where they're claiming they're seeing living dinosaurs in the Congo of Africa and the islands of the South Pacific. And my answer was, okay, we've now had 30, 40, or 50 years to validate these claims, and not a single one of them has been validated. They're not true. Or if they are true, we can't. See, I'm already held to a double standard. I cannot afford to use weak evidences. I want to use the best evidences. And so living dinosaurs is really weak. And plus, let's say we found a small sauropod dinosaur in the Congo River area. What's the evolution going to say? Are they going to say, oh, evolution is not true? They'll say, what do you know? A dinosaur managed to survive all these years. It will not prove evolution wrong. And have you ever considered that all the largest land animals that have ever lived are all extinct? Penguins used to be 6 feet tall. Armadillos used to be the size of a Volkswagen. The largest bears in the world, also according to their bones, they were herbivores, interestingly, were much bigger than today's bears. The biggest elephants, the biggest everything are extinct. Why? Because to be large means you need more food. Means you can't survive environmental changes. To be large means you delay sexual maturation. You don't have offspring until you're big. So imagine, like, I've held a California condor in my arm. They're amazingly light, even though their wingspan is longer than I am tall. They're amazing birds. But the wingspan of the largest bird in the world today is smaller than one wing of the ancient Andean condor, which is now extinct. But imagine that there's this condor population, and they're spreading out on the earth after the flood. And there's different genes in that population for how fast they mature and how large they grow. And let's say that this animal has to go 10 years before it lays an egg. Meanwhile, there are other condors that mature after 1 year and start laying eggs. By the time that animal lays one egg, the other ones are great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. And there are thousands upon thousands of smaller ones before the big one lays one egg. So over time, genetically, the populations get overwhelmed by the fastest reproducing animals. So between the food struggles, the environmental struggles, and just basic genetics, all species should be getting smaller and maturing faster, because that would make more offspring, and therefore they would dominate. Now, I'm rambling about here trying to explain what happened to dinosaurs, but they're not here today. If Noah had taken small dinosaurs on the ark, I can't explain it using this. But if you've taken big dinosaurs in the ark, I can. All I know today is that they're gone. Now, you see what I'm doing also? I'm trying to set up, this is what we can know, this is what we can possibly answer, and there's something we just simply don't have enough information about. It is a healthy thing to take your questions and group them according to that kind of a classification. Because I don't want to come up here and say, absolutely, we have an answer for this, and lie about it. That's not a good way to proceed. But I think dinosaurs are gone basically because of the environment. They couldn't adapt to the modern world is my basic answer. Okay. Shift gears again. If dinosaurs are on the earth after the flood for at least a little while, then they were on earth during the historical period. And there should be some records of man interacting with dinosaurs. Now, at this point, a lot of creation speakers like myself will bring evidences up that I don't like. I don't want to use weak evidences. I want to use the best ones. So here's my favorites. This is the tomb of a bishop who was buried in England 600 years ago. And you see there's this rectangle that goes around his tomb. It's made out of brass, and in that rectangle is carved all these animals. There's a bat, there's a dog, there's a fish, there's a bird. Does anyone disagree with me? Did I identify those animals correctly? Well, right next to those, that's two animals that look like sauropod dinosaurs with their necks wrapped around each other. And notice their tails are held upright. See, even up to the 1970s, the dinosaurs I grew up with, their tails are dragging on the ground. They don't depict them that way anymore because actually their tails are stiff. And second of all, if you want to lift your head up, you need a balance. So the sauropods, their tails are held upright. And notice they're standing up on their legs. And the guy on the left is really hard to see for you, but there's spikes on the tail. That's funny. It's like a Spinosaurus. We found two species of sauropods with spiked tails. How on earth did someone 600 years ago carve something like that? If I was going to make up an animal, what's the probability that I'm going to make up an animal that matches a real animal? It'd be pretty low, wouldn't it be? But depictions like this, we see it all over the place in ancient artwork. Now, this is from Mesopotamia. These look like their necks are too long and their tails are too long until you consider Tanystropheus. Oh. And this is one of my favorites. In the, around about 1,000 years ago, the largest city on earth was in Cambodia, the head of the Khmer Empire. And the engineering that went into feeding millions of people was amazing. They were hydraulic engineers. They could grow so much rice. But then there was a drought, and their civilization collapsed. And the forest took over their city. And now that the Vietnam War and all the problems in Cambodia and those areas in the world have died away, archaeologists are going back and they're hacking back the jungle, and they're re-exposing this amazing city, this city of Angkor Wat. And there's one particular temple, on one particular door frame, there is a monkey, there's a Buddha, there's a water buffalo, and there's that thing in the circle. What is that? That sure looks like a stegosaur. His head is too big. Okay. But he's standing upright. He has plates in his back. In fact, someone just found another one around the corner that looks even more like a stegosaur than this does. But that can't be true because stegosaurs died out 65 million years ago, didn't they? Or maybe they didn't, and maybe the earth really isn't that old, and maybe the Bible is actually true. Oh, interesting. But I remember growing up with stuff like this. You ever seen a picture like this? The world of dinosaurs, the age of dinosaurs, call it what you want. No mammals. No birds, no grass. I was taught, even up to graduate school, grasses did not evolve until 35 million years ago. That means that grasses could not have lived with dinosaurs ever. But, well, paleontology changes again. Have you ever walked out in your backyard and tripped over a piece of fossilized dog mess? That stuff doesn't turn to stone, does it? No. As soon as it rains, it's gone. But we have hundreds of thousands, probably more, of petrified dinosaur dung piles. I have one sitting on my mantelpiece, just because. It is a mystery how these things get petrified, first of all. But because we have so many, we've been able to put together what the animals were eating. In fact, sometimes we can identify the dung to a species of dinosaur. And how do you like this for a job? What do you do? I polish dinosaur dung. So you can take it and polish it and look at it under a microscope and see what the animal was eating. And lo and behold, we found all the major families of grasses in dinosaur dung. And it's not anywhere else in the fossil record, because the fossil record is fickle. Some things are preserved and some things aren't. And just because something is not preserved doesn't mean it wasn't there. And it's a great example from that. So now we have the dinosaur stomachs, and now we have the dinosaur dung. And it tells us a lot of things. This picture's wrong. That world should be covered in grass, and the water and land and air should be teeming with birds and mammals. Because there might be 500 or 600 named species of dinosaurs. We have found as many species of mammals buried with dinosaurs as we have species of dinosaurs. Oh. We have mammals that look like flying squirrels, mammals that were identical to platypuses, mammals that look like badgers with baby Psittacosaurus in their stomach, mammals that look like beavers and were buried with their hair, mammals that look like hedgehogs. Hedgehogs are a rather unique group of animals. Nothing on Earth looks like a hedgehog. They're all by themselves. They have totally unique hair. No animal on Earth has hairs like a hedgehog. But not only do our animals the size and shape of a hedgehog buried in dinosaur-era rocks, but they had the hair preserved also, and they had hedgehog hair. Now, MA, do you see 120 MA, 130 MA, 164 MA on the slide? That's Latin for mega annum. That means millions of years. So the evolutionary community is putting all these diverse mammals prior to when they believed even the dinosaurs evolved. And next time you see a Jurassic Park movie, they better have a hedgehog or a beaver in the movie, or it's wrong. But they're not going to do that because it would be had to contradict too much of what they've already done. Hey, have you ever seen the movie Hidden Figures with Kevin Costner? It's a story of the African American ladies that were really, really smart, and they got recruited by NASA to do all the calculations to get man to the moon. What a cool movie. Well, the facility is really there in Maryland, and there's a guy dropping his wife off at work a couple years ago, and he looks over in the woods, and there's a bunch of pile of rocks. He says, I'm going to go look at those rocks. And I think it was the material they dug up from the foundation is just a spoil pile from the dirt they dug up. And he found one of the most world-class discoveries ever. It's a rock about this big. And in that rock, there are sauropod footprints, pterosaur footprints. There's a nodosaur on the right there, the big orange thing, footprint. There's a coprolite, which is a fossilized dung. There's a scute, which is a bone from the skin. But amongst all that, there are also mammal footprints. So not only did mammals and dinosaurs and pterosaurs live at the same time, they walked through the same muddy puddle. And also, this is telling us that fossils aren't just bones. We fossilized a behavior of a community. And that is really cool. But it's not just mammals, it's also birds. But birds are weird. In fact, a lot of the birds in the ancient record, they have teeth. They have claws. Well, there's one bird in the modern world. Genetically, it is different than all the other birds alive today. It's called the stink bird, or the hoatzin of South America. The babies have fully functional wing claws. You realize that the wing of a bird is his hand, right? That's his fingers. Just like a bat. It's fingers. So there could be claws there, and this guy's got claws. And now, if you watch How to Train Your Dragon, there are some animals who have 2 legs or 4 legs and 2 wings. That makes it a hexapod. No. Animals that fly, their front legs are their wings. That's birds, bats, pterosaurs, and these weird ancient birds. But the hoatzin has something else really strange about it. Not only does it have claws, it has a flat breastbone. You've eaten chicken. How do you get the white meat off the chicken? There's a thing on the breastbone, right? It's a keel. And you have to dig the meat out of that. You know what that keel does for the bird? It makes a triangle. It lets the muscles attach here to makes it stronger so it can fly. Without that keel, they don't have the mechanical advantage for flying. But the hoatzin can fly, and it also has a flat breastbone like a lot of the ancient birds. So this weird bird has 2 things in it that make it unique, but also make it similar to some of the extinct forms like Archaeopteryx. But something else about birds. You can't move your upper jaw, can you? But a bird can. Their palate is not fused like ours. They can raise their upper beak. So a bill is diagnostic of a bird. Feathers are diagnostic of birds, but wing claws are not. In fact, there's some teeth-like structures in ancient birds, but geese have teeth. They've got ridges in their bill. They're not peg-like teeth, but they're ridgy sort of things. So there's lots of weird things in the ancient record, but look at this one. This is Anchiornis huxleyi. That, my friends, is a bird. Can you see the tail feathers? Can feathers be preserved in the fossil record? Do dinosaurs have feathers? Hold that thought. I'm going to get to it in a couple of slides. But we know that birds had feathers, and the feathers can be preserved in the fossil record. But birds are also different because they don't have a long tail. You look at the rear end, next time you eat chicken, you're going to be dissecting this chicken to see what I'm talking about. They have the keel, and on their rear end, they don't have a long bony tail. They got this little thing, it's called a pygostyle, just a couple of bones, and the feathers are anchored to that. So even a peacock, it doesn't have a tail, it's got a little nub. And the giant feathers are just anchored to that little nub. Okay? This guy is a pygostyle. He has a beak, he has feathers, he has a bird anatomy, but the date is 160 millions of years ago. Oh, wait a minute. This very bird-like thing lived with dinosaurs. The only bird ever discovered fossilized with an egg inside is this one, Avamaya schweizeri, named after Mary Schweitzer, who we're going to talk about in a minute. But this egg has multiple layers of eggshell. If you take a chicken and you keep chasing it and don't let it roost, every day it'll add another layer of eggshell to the egg, and it'll lay an egg with multiple layers of eggshell. This animal was stressed. It could not find a place to roost. And then it was caught up in the waters of Noah's flood, petrified with a multi-layered eggshell inside it. That's cool. Here's another one. The reason this is important, because first of all, can you see the little chicken feet on this thing? And the wings? Well, you can't see it from this perspective, but its lungs are preserved. And this is critical, because birds have different lungs than everything else. A bird doesn't breathe like you and me. When we breathe, the air only goes down so far. And the oxygen has to diffuse into the lungs. The carbon dioxide has to diffuse out of the lungs. We have a dead space at the bottom of our lungs where you don't get a lot of air exchange. So we're not very good at pulling oxygen out of the air, which is why we're never going to run a 1-minute mile. Humans are never going to do that. Birds, though, they don't have dead space in the bottom of their lungs. The air flows out the bottom of the lung and flows around the backside. So they might breathe in and out their nose, but it's a one-way cycle through the lung. There's no dead space. They pull out a lot more oxygen that also allows them to fly. Reptiles don't breathe like that either. We have a diaphragm. It's a muscle here. It goes, but a reptile moves its liver. They move their liver to pump air in and out of their lungs. So in the supposed evolution of birds from dinosaurs, the first thing that would have to happen is the animal would have to have a hole poked in the bottom of its lung and then it dies. So there's an impossible transition here from the reptile lung to the bird lung. And plus, even after it has a hole poked in the bottom of its stomach and its lung, how is the air going to follow around? You need another hole at the top of the lungs to connect to the exhale mechanism. How is this going to evolve without killing the animal? That's a great question. But I remember, as a young man, being firmly convinced that evolution was true. And I would have looked at a picture like this and said, look at that. There's a fossil record of all the dinosaurs. Evolution's a fact. Look at that. The whole fossil record goes back to a single common ancestor at the bottom. You got the Triassic, the Jurassic, the Cretaceous. This is millions of years of evolution. Evolution's a fact, I would have said. But what I didn't know at the time was a great trick is actually to cover up all the things they don't know in pictures like this. And this is what you're left with. 50 family sticks. 50 basic kinds of dinosaur with no missing links between them. They're missing. It's not just between men and monkeys. It's between essentially every group of animals and every other group of animals throughout the entire fossil record. The evidence for evolution is in the imagination of the evolutionist. It's not actually in the fossil record. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw red lines on top of these bars. I'm going to shove everything off to the side, and I'm going to add the birds and the mammals that I just talked about. And this is what you get. First of all, we have found mammals, many, many, many mammals, throughout the entire fossil record of the dinosaurs. Now, I put a question mark after birds because we don't have a lot of birds. There's a handful of them. But they're also buried with dinosaurs. I mean, I was taught that, yeah, mammals existed like little mouse-like creatures toward the end of the dinosaur era. And there are a few birds, primitive birds, toward the end of the dinosaur era. And when the meteor hit and the dinosaurs died out, that's when mammals and birds became all the species we have today. It's not true. Especially consider we have rhinoceros-sized mammals from the Triassic, which is the bottom, the earliest time period of dinosaur history. There are already rhinoceroses, or things the size of rhinoceros, that are bigger than most dinosaurs. The Jurassic Park movies and series and all the stuff we hear, I'm sorry, they're spinning a line. They're feeding you false information. And we go because they're exciting movies, but the ideas still trickle into our brains. Okay, so let's end up with, did dinosaurs have feathers? Does the Bible say dinosaurs did not have feathers? So honestly, I don't care either way. I disbelieve evolution for many other reasons. I don't even need the whole feather argument. And if they had feathers, okay, that's fine. I mean, if you look at humans, we are vertebrates, we're mammals, we're placentals, we cluster with apes. The most similar species to humans is a chimpanzee, in many, many, many different measures. And I'm fine with that. I don't believe we evolved from chimpanzees. But if you look at birds cluster with reptiles. There's a lot of things that birds share with reptiles. Look at a bird foot. Man, it looks like a dinosaur foot, except that's a dinosaur foot, and that's a bird foot. It's different fingers. Same, they have three, whatever. They use a different, you get my point. There's a lot of similarities between birds and dinosaurs, and if a scientist wants to group them with dinosaurs, I'm fine with that. And if dinosaurs had feathers, okay, whatever. But I'm not entirely convinced. This is Sinosauropteryx, the poster child of the feathered dinosaurs. There's a fuzz that runs down his back and down his tail. And that, they said, look at the feathers. Evolution is true. Now, wait a second. Other scientists look under this years later, under a microscope. They said, oh, we can see the layer of the animal's skin, and all this fuzz is underneath the skin. This is just decayed collagen from the skin. It's not feathers. And then in this paper they wrote, and it's obvious to anyone who looks. Why was it not obvious to the first scientist who looked? Because he and his cohort, they wanted to show that dinosaurs had feathers. And that was not a good example. Okay, so let's look at Velociraptor. The top two images here are from a Velociraptor. The arm bone, and the second is a zoom up of the central section. The bottom two pictures are from a turkey vulture. The lowest picture is a bone with the feathers. Take away the feathers, that's the C, the third one down. You have a bone with bumps on it. You know what those bumps are? I didn't do that. They'll fix it. The bumps are the place where the feather attaches to the bone. So if like a peacock wants to lift his tail feathers up, it needs a muscle to do that, and the muscle is attached to a little bump. It's called a quill knob. Penguins don't have them. Ostriches don't have them. Not even all the flying birds have them. But birds that actively lift up their feathers have them. Well, velociraptors, and the second picture from the top, do you see there's 6 little white arrows. Can you see the little white arrows? They're pointing to these teeny bumps that they say are quill knobs. Yeah. Nobody believes a velociraptor could fly. And a lot of flying birds don't even have quill knobs. So if velociraptor even had feathers, why would it have quill knobs? And plus, they're tiny. I'm unconvinced. And here's another problem. If you're a dinosaur that has feathers, how do you shed your skin? Because reptiles shed their skin. Feathers poke through the skin like a hair. A feather is essentially a hyper-complex hair. It's not scales. It's something that grows out of a shaft. And T-Rex obviously did not have feathers. We have fossils from different places of T-Rex skin, and there's no evidence of feathers because there'd be a hole in the scales. So did dinosaurs have feathers? I'm still waiting for the evidence. But if they did, I'll be fine with that. So see what I did? I'm trying to weigh evidences. I'm saying, here's information, here's the answer we can derive. Whatever the answer is, it is. But none of that even matters. Because I can show you, for scientific fact, and I don't like using the word fact in science because things can change, but once you get enough things all piled up, it is quite conclusively true that dinosaur fossils are not millions of years old. This is some electron microscope pictures from the inside of a triceratops horn. In the middle, on the right, there are 2 blobby cells with spikes. Those are called osteoblasts. Those are bone cells. The cells are still intact. Yeah, the bone is not fossilized. It's not full of minerals. It's the original material. Wait a minute. You can't leave a ham sandwich on a counter for a week before it starts turning green. Could you bury a pig in your backyard for 100 years and expect to find any pig? No, it would be completely decayed. And yet, we also have squishy, stinky, flexible material from inside T-Rex leg bones from Montana. Again, non-petrified material sitting in the ground for millions of years. Now, I think this thing is 4,500 years old. I'm shocked there's any material left in here. But it's definitely there. We also have evidence of DNA in dinosaur bones. Now, the 2 pictures on the left, I've used this stain in the laboratory because I'm a geneticist. It's called DAPI. It's a stain that sticks inside DNA. When you wash the cells with water, the DNA stays behind, and you can see the DNA. That's dinosaur DNA. But bacteria have DNA, so they also use another stain for a protein bacteria don't have, in case that was bacteria living in the bone. And it also lit up what looks like the nucleus. It's called a histone. It's a protein that your DNA wraps around in the nucleus. So it looks like there's intact DNA in dinosaur bones. And in his new book we have out here, Titans of the Earth, Sea, and Air, an awesome book about dinosaurs, it also talks about all the evidence we have of carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. Now, I'm sorry. If the entire Earth was made of pure carbon-14, it would be completely gone in less than 1 million years. Carbon-14 breaks down really quickly. Therefore, if there's carbon-14 in dinosaur bones, they are not millions of years old. So between the non-petrified, soft tissue, the evidence of DNA, and the evidence of carbon-14, we can conclude that dinosaurs actually suggest that the Earth is young, just like the Bible says. Now again, a lot more information in Creation Magazine, on our website, creation.com, and that book, Titans of the Earth, Sea, and Air. We've got some other books. Here's a kid's book, Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb. This is such a popular book. We wrote a second one called Exploring Dinosaurs with Mr. Hibb, and it's on the tables out there also. But I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to take a short break. 1 Peter 3:15. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that's in you. You do it with gentleness and respect. You know, I tried to model that. I get angry, especially when I'm insulted. I know that. But we are called to answer people persuasively. And the only way we can do that is if we learn and ask good questions. And creation.com is there to help you answer those questions. You right? Your brains are full? Good. Let's take a break, and I'll see you back here in 15 minutes or so. Oh, gonna say something? Okay.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break and start back at 11 o'clock. More people will be coming in. Let me say, if you're not staying for the 11 o'clock service, be sure to leave a love offering. We're going to be taking up a love offering at the end of the 11 o'clock service. And again, if you're not staying for that service, I have offering plates at every door. So this door, over there, and there are 2 plates on the